The church was full when Nadia arrived. 300 chairs, every one of them taken. White roses tied to the end of each row. Candles lit along the windows. The carpet runner was the exact shade of ivory that Nadia had spent 4 weeks choosing from a catalog, holding swatches up to the kitchen light, while her mother watched from across the table with tired, hopeful eyes. The carpet was perfect, the flowers were perfect, the music playing from the small speakers near the altar was the exact song she had chosen, a piece she had loved since she was 17, and had kept in a folder on her phone labeled Someday. Everything was exactly as she had planned it. Owen was not there. Nadia did not know that yet when she stepped into the small room at the back of the church. She did not know it when her friend Cora adjusted the veil and told her she looked beautiful. She did not know it when her father knocked on the door and came inside with his eyes already red, the way they always got when he was trying not to cry. She did not know it when she picked up her small bouquet of white roses and took a slow breath and told herself that everything was fine, that the nerves she felt were normal, that every woman on her wedding day felt this exact tight feeling in her chest. She found out 4 minutes before she was supposed to walk through the doors. Her phone buzzed on the table beside the mirror. Cora saw it first. She picked it up without thinking, the way you pick up a phone when someone's hands are full. Her face changed. Nadia watched it happen in the mirror. She watched Cora's expression go from casual to something very careful and very still, the kind of stillness that comes right before someone says something they do not want to say. "Give me the phone," Nadia said. Cora did not move. "Cora, give me the phone." Cora walked over and placed it on the table in front of Nadia without speaking. She stepped back. Nadia looked down at the screen. There were 2 messages from Owen. The first one had been sent 40 minutes ago and she had missed it because she had been sitting in the car listening to her mother talk about a cousin's new apartment. The second had been sent 7 minutes ago. She read the first one. It said, "I can't do this, Nadia. I'm sorry. I tried to tell you last week, but I couldn't. I'm not in the right place. I think we both know it hasn't been right for a long time. Please don't call me. Please just let today be what it is and let me figure out my life." She read it twice. She picked up the phone and read the second message. It said, "I'm already gone. I'm sorry." She set the phone down. She looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was beautiful. It had taken her 3 months to find. It had taken her mother 6 weeks to save the money to pay for it without telling Nadia she was doing it, until the bill was already settled. It had a small row of buttons down the back and a lace edge at the hem, and Nadia had cried when she first tried it on, not from sadness but from the simple feeling of something being exactly right. She looked at the dress in the mirror for a long moment. Then she looked at Cora. "He's not coming," Nadia said. Cora's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. "Then we need to tell my father," Nadia said. Her voice was steady. She did not understand why it was steady. Some part of her brain had simply decided that the steadiness was necessary and had locked every other thing behind a door that she did not have the key to yet. Later she would understand that this is what shock does. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the body deciding which feeling can survive the moment and which ones must wait. She opened the door herself. Her father was standing in the hallway. He saw her face and knew immediately. He was a man who had spent 60 years reading the faces of people he loved, and he read hers in less than a second. He reached for her hand and she took it, and she told him quietly what had happened, and he stood there holding her hand, and she watched him age 4 years in 4 seconds. "Nadia," he said. "I'm all right," she said. "We need to go tell them." "We don't have to. Dad, 300 people are sitting in there. We can't just leave them." He looked at her for a long moment. He was searching her face for permission to fall apart on her behalf, and she did not give it to him. She squeezed his hand once and turned toward the doors. She walked through them herself. She did not let anyone escort her. She walked down that aisle alone, in her dress with its perfect buttons and its lace hem, past 300 people who had come to watch her get married. She walked past aunts and cousins and her mother's old friends and her school friends and her father's business partners and people she barely knew, who had come because weddings are the kind of event people show up to even when their relationship with the couple is loose and distant. Every face turned toward her. She reached the front of the room where the priest was standing, and where Owen was not standing, and she stopped, and she faced the room, and she spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. She said that she was sorry everyone had traveled here today. She said that the wedding would not be taking place. She said that she hoped they would enjoy the reception food anyway because the caterers had already prepared it, and it would be a waste to let it go cold. Then she said thank you. She walked back up the aisle. No one made a sound until she was through the doors. Then the room erupted into the specific kind of noise that a crowd makes when it is simultaneously shocked and unable to stop itself from reacting. A blur of whispers and gasps and chairs scraping, and someone near the back starting to cry. Nadia did not hear any of it. She walked into the small back room and she sat down in the chair in front of the mirror and she looked at her own face for a long time. Cora came in and sat beside her without speaking. That was the right thing to do, and Cora, to her credit, knew it. After a while, Nadia's mother appeared in the doorway. Her expression was not grief. It was something older and quieter than grief. She looked at her daughter and she crossed the room and she put both arms around her from behind, and Nadia watched in the mirror as her mother held her, and her mother did not say anything either, because there is nothing to say to your child when the thing you were afraid of finally happens. What her mother was afraid of was not Owen specifically. She had liked Owen well enough. What she was afraid of was something she had never been able to name clearly. A feeling she had had since Nadia was a little girl that the world had a habit of letting her daughter carry weight that should have been distributed among many people. Nadia had always been the one who carried things. She had started working at 17 to help with the household costs when her father's architecture firm lost a major contract. She had put herself through 2 years of a design program before the money ran out. She had picked up the slack in every relationship she had ever been in, the friend who remembered the birthdays, the girlfriend who planned the dates, the daughter who noticed when the electricity bill was late. She was not a martyr about it. She did not perform her sacrifices. She simply lived at a slight forward lean, always tilting toward whatever needed to be held up. Owen had leaned on that. She understood that now, sitting in front of the mirror in her wedding dress. She understood it with a clarity that should have come much sooner and had not because she was not intelligent, she was deeply intelligent, but because some truths only become visible from exactly the right distance, and the distance required was apparently the length of an aisle walked alone. The flowers on the table beside her smelled very strongly. She had never liked very strong flowers. She had never mentioned it to anyone. This seemed, sitting here, like an unusually large amount of information to receive all at once. She reached up and removed her veil very carefully. She folded it on the table. She looked at Cora. "Can you drive me home?" she said. "Yes," Cora said immediately. "Right now, yes. I want to stop and get something to eat on the way. I haven't eaten since yesterday and I'm very hungry." Cora blinked. "Okay. Something simple, not a restaurant, just somewhere with food. Of course." "Thank you," Nadia said. They left through the side door so Nadia did not have to walk past the 300 people currently standing in the parking lot, with the uncomfortable energy of people who do not know what the right thing to do is after a wedding that did not happen. Nadia changed out of the dress in the back seat of Cora's car, working through the buttons while Cora drove and pretended not to notice. She had packed a small bag with a change of clothes out of a deeply practical habit that had apparently been functioning as a quiet kind of insurance against disaster. She put on jeans and a gray sweater and folded the dress carefully across the back seat. They stopped at a small diner near the highway. Nadia ordered eggs and toast and a large coffee and she ate all of it. Cora watched her with the expression of someone trying to identify something they have not encountered before. "Are you all right?" Cora finally asked. "No," Nadia said, "but I'm hungry, and the eggs are good, and I'll figure out the other part later." That was true. She would figure it out later. What she did not know yet, sitting in that diner with her wedding dress folded in the back of Cora's car and a cup of mediocre coffee warming her hands, was that the other part was considerably larger and more complicated than she understood. She did not know about the debt. She did not know about the debt between her father and Owen's family that had been made in the same quiet room where her father made all his careful private decisions. She did not know that the wedding had been, in the language of the people who had arranged it, a financial arrangement as much as a personal one. She did not know that Owen's disappearance had not only cost her a marriage, it had started a clock. She sat in the diner and drank her coffee. Outside the window, the afternoon light was turning gold and flat, the particular light of a day that had begun with enormous hope and was ending as something else entirely. A couple walked past on the sidewalk outside holding a baby between them. A man in a red jacket was talking on his phone with the animated energy of someone winning an argument. A little girl was dragging a large dog by its leash with the total commitment of someone who has decided that willpower alone will move a 70-pound animal. Nadia watched all of them. She was 26 years old. She had been with Owen for 11 years, since she was 15 and he was 16, and he had borrowed her pen in class and never given it back. 11 years is not simply a relationship. It is a language. It is a set of habits, so ingrained they feel like personality. It is the other person's coffee order and the way they sneeze and their specific brand of stubbornness and the exact angle of their laugh. It is years of choosing them over and over, automatically. The way you breathe, not because you decide to each time, but because it has become the thing your body does. She was going to have to unlearn all of it. She finished her coffee and set the cup down. "I think I'd like to go home now," she said. "Okay," said Cora. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. Cora was very good at silence. It was one of the things Nadia valued most about her. Cora did not feel the need to fill space with words when words were not the right tool. She simply drove and let the road pass under them, and let Nadia sit with whatever she was sitting with. When they reached the house, Nadia's parents were already home. She could see the lights on. She could see the shape of her father through the kitchen window, standing very still, which meant he was standing the way he always stood when he was trying to hold himself together. She sat in the car for a moment. "Thank you," she said to Cora, "for everything today." "I didn't do anything," Cora said. "You were there," Nadia said. "That's everything." She got out of the car. She walked up the front path. She opened the door. Her mother was at the table with a cup of tea. Her father was still at the window. Neither of them spoke when she came in, which she was grateful for. She sat down at the table. Her father turned from the window. He was a tall man who had once been a strong man and still had the frame of one, but something had gone out of him in the last few years in a way that Nadia had watched happen and had not been able to stop. He looked at her with an expression she recognized as guilt, which confused her, because she was the one who had been left at the altar. "Dad," she said, "sit down." He sat. "Tell me what I'm not supposed to know," she said. Her mother's hand tightened around her cup. Her father looked at the table. "Tell me," Nadia said again, quietly. And he did. He told her about the loan. He told her about the contract that had gone wrong 3 years ago, and the debt that had grown quietly since then, the kind of debt that starts small and reasonable, and becomes, over time, a different animal entirely. He told her about the conversation with Owen's father, Gordon, in this very kitchen 18 months ago, when Gordon had proposed a solution. Gordon's family would absorb the debt, roll it into a family agreement, make it disappear. In return, Nadia and Owen would marry. Nadia sat very still. "You arranged my wedding to pay a debt," she said. "It wasn't only that," her father said. "Owen loved you. He did. We thought. You thought the arrangement would work because we were already together. We thought it would be good for everyone. And if it wasn't, if it fell apart, did you think about what happened to the debt then?" Her father was quiet. She understood his silence. "It comes back," she said. "The debt comes back. There's a clause," her mother said very quietly, "in the agreement. If the marriage doesn't happen, the original terms are reinstated, plus interest." Nadia looked at the table. She looked at her hands, the faint line on her finger where she had been wearing a ring for 2 years. She had taken it off in Cora's car, dropped it into the small side pocket of her bag without thinking about it, the automatic action of a person clearing a surface. "How much?" she said. Her father told her. She said nothing for a very long time. Then she said, "All right, Nadia. I'm not angry with you," she said. "I'm not saying that to be kind. I mean it. I understand why you did it. I understand the situation you were in." She paused. "I'm going to need a little time to think." She stood up. She went to her old bedroom, the one that still had the bookshelf she had built with her father at age 13, and 2 shelves slightly crooked because she had been impatient with the level. She lay down on the bed in her jeans and her gray sweater with her shoes still on. She stared at the ceiling. She was 26 years old, she had been abandoned at her own wedding, and her family was in debt to a man who had just had his son refuse to go through with the arrangement they had made. She thought about the little girl dragging the dog on the sidewalk outside the diner, the total confidence of it, the absolute refusal to accept that the dog might have its own plans. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she lay there in the dark with her eyes closed and let the day settle over her like something being absorbed slowly into the ground, and she breathed in and breathed out, and she waited for the morning, when she would need to think clearly. The morning came. She got up before everyone else. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and she wrote down everything she knew, and everything she did not know, and everything she needed to find out. She wrote neatly, in her small, careful handwriting, the same handwriting she had used to take notes in her architecture program before she had left it. She had left a lot of things. She looked at the notepad. Then she turned to a fresh page, and she wrote 2 words at the top. The 2 words were, "What now?" She looked at them for a while. Then she put the pen down and drank her coffee and waited for her parents to wake up. Because whatever came next was going to require all three of them. And she had learned a long time ago that the best thing you can do at the beginning of a hard problem is make sure the people around you have had enough sleep. The paper sitting on her father's desk was not dramatic in appearance. It was a standard document, printed on plain white paper, with a letterhead that read Hartley Financial Group in simple black letters. It had several paragraphs of language that sounded very reasonable, until you read the specific numbers in the third paragraph and understood what they meant. What they meant was this. The Harwell family owed Gordon Hartley $180,000. The amount had started smaller. Interest had been compounding quietly for 3 years, at a rate that was legal, but not generous. The original loan had been used to cover losses from a commercial development project that had collapsed when the primary contractor walked off the job, and the secondary insurer disputed the claim, and the bank called in a line of credit that had been extended in better times. Nadia's father, Martin Harwell, had been a respected architect in this city for 30 years. He had designed 3 public buildings that still stood, one of them a library that had won a regional award and whose photograph still sat in a frame in the hallway. He had made careful, considered decisions his entire career. The one decision he had not made carefully was the development project, and he had known it was a risk, and he had done it anyway because he was 61, and the firm was slowing down, and the project had seemed like the kind of opportunity that comes once, and if not taken, never returns. He had been wrong about the opportunity. He had spent the years since trying to manage the consequence without letting it swallow the family. Nadia sat across from him at the kitchen table and looked at the document. "Who else knows about this?" she said. "The accountant," her father said, "and Hartley's lawyers. Not Cora? Not anyone outside the family?" "No." "Okay." She set the paper down. "I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me directly." "Yes." "Did Owen know about this arrangement? About the debt being tied to the marriage?" Her father was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. This was the answer she had expected, and also the answer she had hoped not to receive. She nodded once. "So he left knowing what it would do to us. He may not have thought through the full—" "Dad," she looked at him. "He knew. He left anyway. That's the information." Her mother, who had been standing at the counter, came and sat down. The three of them sat together at the table, the way they had sat together during every significant event of Nadia's childhood. The same table, the same chairs, the family arrangement that had remained constant through her grandmother's passing, and the collapsed contract, and the decision to sell the second car, and every hard conversation they had ever needed to sit down for. "The money is real," Nadia said. "Gordon Hartley will want it. He has the paperwork and the clause is clear, so we need to figure out what comes next." "Nadia, you don't need to." "I'm not being noble," she said. "I'm being practical. This is our problem. Mine as much as yours. So let's talk about it practically." Her mother looked at her with an expression that was not quite pride and not quite sadness, but something that lived between them. The feeling a parent gets when their child does something that proves they are stronger than you wanted them to need to be. They talked for 2 hours. What became clear over those 2 hours was that the options were limited. Her father's firm was operating on a small margin. There was equity in the house, but not enough to cover the full amount. A bank loan was possible, but would require collateral and a credit profile that had taken damage over the past 3 years. Selling assets was a process that would take time they might not have. Nadia had 3 notebooks in front of her by the end of it, each one filled with columns of numbers that she had been adding and rearranging and checking with the calculator on her phone. The numbers did not improve with rearranging. Numbers rarely did. She went to bed that night with the document and the notebooks and a very clear picture of a problem that had no simple solution, and a timeline that did not allow for slow ones. She woke up before dawn and could not go back to sleep. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table in the dark and thought about what she knew. She thought about the lawyers she could call. She had spoken to one the previous summer about a completely different matter, a noise complaint from a neighbor, and the lawyer had been thorough and had given her a straightforward assessment of the situation. She would call him. He would be able to tell her whether the clause was genuinely enforceable or whether there was language in it that could be negotiated. She thought about the bank. She had a relationship at the local branch, nothing significant, but she had been a customer for 8 years without any problems, and the branch manager had once told her that they valued long-standing customers. She would find out what that value was actually worth. She thought about the accountant. Her father's accountant was a quiet man named Bernard who wore the same style of tie every single day and had the patient energy of someone who has spent 40 years looking at financial situations that seemed impossible and finding the path through them. Bernard would have ideas she had not had yet. She wrote all of this down. She also wrote down on a separate page the name that had been sitting at the edge of her thinking since the previous afternoon. She had not heard the name until 3 weeks ago, in a conversation that was not about her family at all. It had come up in a lunch with her mother's friend Helen, a retired accountant with a sharp memory for financial news, who had been talking about a development project in the south part of the city that had been acquired and turned around by a man named Calum Voss. Helen had said the name with a specific tone, the tone people use when describing someone who operates in a different tier than ordinary business. He's the kind of man, Helen had said, who solves situations that other resources can't reach. I've seen it twice in 30 years. He's not a bank, he's not a charity. He's someone who decides whether a thing is worth his attention, and if it is, the thing gets done. Nadia had filed the name without knowing why. She looked at it now on the page. She wrote underneath it, "Find out more." She tore the page out and put it in the front pocket of her notebook where she would see it. Over the following week, she made every practical call she could think of. The lawyer, a careful man named Fletcher who had the unhurried speech of someone who charged by the hour and was comfortable with that, told her the clause was enforceable. He told her the language was specific and had been written by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. He told her that Gordon Hartley was, in his professional assessment, unlikely to negotiate on the core terms because the agreement had been structured specifically to make renegotiation difficult. "Is there anything?" Nadia said. "There are always options," Fletcher said. "None of them are fast and none of them are cheap. What's the cheapest fast option?" A pause. "I don't have one," Fletcher said. "But I can tell you that I've seen situations like this resolved by parties outside the conventional financial system. People with enough resources and enough flexibility to make arrangements that banks can't make." "Who?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I've heard Calum Voss's name in situations like this," he said. "I can't speak to his terms or his methods because I've never worked with him directly. But I've heard his name." She had thanked him and hung up and written Calum Voss on a new page of her notebook, this time at the top, with a circle around it. She asked the branch manager about loans. He was genuinely regretful. The numbers did not work in the time frame. He could not help. She called Bernard the accountant. Bernard looked at the numbers and said that the only realistic fast resolution was either a significant asset sale or a third-party debt acquisition. He did not have suggestions for the third party, but he confirmed that it was the direction. She called a debt restructuring consultant whose name Cora had found on the internet. The consultant was brisk and honest and told her in 12 minutes that the clause was as solid as Fletcher had said, and that Gordon Hartley had almost certainly structured it that way deliberately. He wanted the marriage, the consultant said, and failing that, he wanted the debt back with interest. This document was written to make sure he got one or the other. So there's no middle ground. Not with him. Not through standard channels. She thanked him and hung up. She called Cora. They met at a coffee shop near the library, a place they had been meeting since they were teenagers, with the same slightly uneven chairs and the same corner table that they had claimed as their own so long ago that the staff seemed to regard it as theirs too. "Walk me through it," Cora said. Nadia did. Cora listened without interrupting, which was an effort for her, and asked 3 questions at the end, all of them useful. "And this Voss person," Cora said, "you've mentioned him twice." "Everyone I've talked to has mentioned him," Nadia said. Fletcher, Bernard, the restructuring consultant, all pointed in the same direction without quite saying his name. "So contact him." "It's not that simple. He's not approachable in the usual sense. He doesn't take cold calls. He doesn't take meetings from people he doesn't know. He works through his own network." "Then find someone in his network." "That's what I'm trying to do." Cora looked at her. "What are you actually planning to do?" Cora said. Nadia looked at her coffee. "I'm going to write him a letter," she said. Cora blinked. "A letter. A real one. On paper. Everything true. Everything accurate. The situation exactly as it is. Why a letter?" "Because everyone who has talked to me about him has said the same thing about how he operates. He responds to honesty and to situations he finds interesting. He doesn't respond to the usual things, pressure, urgency, social positioning. So I'm not going to try any of those. I'm just going to tell him the truth and see if the truth is enough." Cora looked at her for a long moment. "That is either a very brave idea or a very impractical one," she said. "Probably both," Nadia said. "When are you going to write it?" "Tonight." She wrote it that night. She sat at the small table near the window in her room, with a pad of the pale yellow notepaper she had always used, and she wrote for 3 hours. She did not try to construct a persuasive case. She was not looking for sympathy. She was not presenting the best version of the situation. She was describing the situation as it actually was, with all its complications and all its gaps, and she was doing it in the plainest language she could find, because plain language is the most honest kind, and honesty was the one thing she had in full supply. She wrote about her father and the project and the debt and the years of managing it quietly. She wrote about Owen and the wedding and the clause that had been activated. She wrote the numbers accurately. She acknowledged the gaps in what she knew. She said what she was asking for, which was not a specific outcome but a conversation, and even that she said without expectation. She ended the letter by saying that she understood if he did not have the interest or the time, and that she thanked him for reading as far as he had. She put the letter in an envelope. She addressed it. Calum Voss, personal. She held it for a moment. She did not know if it would ever reach him. She did not know if he would read it if it did. She did not know what she would do if neither of these things happened. She knew that it was the truest thing she had at the moment and she was going to send it. She found Fletcher's phone number. The next morning she called him and asked if he knew anyone who could get a letter to Calum Voss. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. Then he said he knew someone who knew Voss's assistant, and that he would pass the name along, and that beyond that he could not promise anything. "That's enough," she said. She handed him the envelope. Then she waited. The waiting was harder than the writing. She was not a patient person by nature. She was a person who moved toward problems and worked them systematically, and stayed with them until they resolved. Waiting without knowing what you were waiting for ran against everything in her nature. She filled the days. She worked at the planning office, a part-time job she had held for 2 years, the kind of work she was good at and that paid enough to contribute to the household, without being the thing that defined her. She helped her father with the firm's correspondence, the administrative work that had piled up while he was managing the weight of the debt. She went for walks. She sat in the garden in the evenings when the weather allowed, and looked at the roses that were past their season. She thought about the letter. She thought about Owen, not with bitterness. She was past bitterness already, which surprised her a little. She thought about him more with the kind of clarity that comes after a long, slow revelation, the understanding that something you could not quite name for a long time has finally named itself. Owen had been good to her in many of the ordinary ways. He had been kind and funny and reliably present for the small daily texture of their years together. But he had also been, she understood now, a person who moved through life by leaning on whatever was most available, and she had always been most available. And she had let that happen because the leaning had always felt, to her, like need, and need had always felt, to her, like something to be met. She had spent 11 years meeting his need without noticing that no one was meeting hers. She did not hate him for it. She simply understood it, the way you understand a pattern once it has been made visible. 9 days after she had given Fletcher the letter, he called. "The letter was passed along," he said. "I can't tell you more than that. Whether it was read, I don't know. Whether there will be a response, I don't know." "Thank you, Fletcher," she said. She hung up and went back to her father's desk, and looked at the document with the numbers in the 3rd paragraph. She was going to figure this out. She did not know how yet, but she was going to figure it out. She picked up her notepad and began working through the numbers again, slowly and carefully, looking for the things she might have missed. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. Nadia was at the kitchen table with her notes spread around her, a cup of coffee going cold at her elbow, and her second attempt at organizing the family's financial records into something that made enough sense to work with. She had been awake since 5, not from worry exactly, but from the specific restlessness of someone who has a problem they cannot currently solve, and knows that the inability to solve it right now does not mean the problem is waiting for them. She answered on the second ring. The voice on the other end was a woman's voice, efficient and pleasant in equal measure. "Is this Nadia Harwell?" "Yes. My name is Petra. I'm calling on behalf of Calum Voss. He received your letter. He would like to offer you a meeting." Nadia sat very still. "When?" she said. "Monday morning, 8 o'clock. The address is Voss Holdings, 44 Meridian Street. You'll need to bring identification. You'll be given 12 minutes. 12 minutes, Nadia said. "Yes." "I understand. I'll be there." "Thank you, Miss Harwell." The call ended. Nadia sat at the table with the phone in her hand for a moment. 12 minutes. She had spent 3 hours writing the letter. She had 12 minutes to make it mean something in a room with a man she had never met, who operated by rules she did not fully understand, who had agreed to see her out of what was apparently a considered decision and not a casual one. She put the phone down. She picked up the notepad. She wrote at the top of a fresh page, 12 minutes. What matters? She began to write. She spent the weekend preparing in the only way that felt honest to her, which was not preparing a pitch or an argument or a strategy, but preparing the truth of the situation as clearly and completely as she could. What was real, what was needed, what she was asking for, what she could not offer. She was not under any illusion that she had much to offer. She was a 26-year-old woman with an unfinished architecture degree and a part-time job at a planning office, and no financial leverage of any kind. What she had was the situation as it was, and the truth of it. On Monday morning she got up at 5:30. She dressed carefully, not expensively. She did not own expensive clothes, but carefully. Dark trousers, a white shirt, a gray jacket that she had bought 2 years ago for a job interview and had kept in good condition. She put her hair back simply. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like someone who was trying to be taken seriously. She hoped that was enough. She left the house at 7 and took the bus across town. She had considered calling a cab, but the bus gave her time to think, and she needed the time to think more than she needed to arrive looking like she had taken a cab. 44 Meridian Street was a building she had passed many times without registering it. It was not an architectural statement. It was clean and modern and severe, 12 floors of glass and gray stone, with a lobby visible from the street, spare and well lit, with a reception desk near the center and a security checkpoint to the right. She arrived at 7:48. She went in. The lobby was quiet. She gave her name at the desk and showed her identification, and was given a visitor badge and directed to a seating area on the left. The seating area had 2 chairs and a low table, and a small plant that was clearly real, and clearly well cared for. She sat in one of the chairs and put her bag on her lap and waited. At 8 o'clock exactly, a woman appeared from the elevator. She had the particular efficiency of movement that belongs to people who have very precisely organized minds. "Ms. Harwell, I'm Petra." Nadia stood. They shook hands. "Mr. Voss will see you now," Petra said. They went up in the elevator to the 10th floor. The elevator opened onto a hallway with a gray carpet and doors on each side, and one large door at the end. Petra walked to the large door and knocked once and opened it. She said, "Ms. Harwell," and Nadia walked in. The office was not the room of a man who needed to impress anyone. There was a large desk, clean, with only a laptop and one folder on it. One wall was glass, overlooking the street below. There were 2 chairs in front of the desk. There was no art. There were no personal items visible. There was a small table against one wall with 2 glasses and a water pitcher. Behind the desk was Calum Voss. He was taller than she had expected, though he was seated. He had dark hair going gray at the sides. He was wearing a plain dark shirt with no tie. He had the look of someone who had spent a significant part of his life doing physically demanding work, and had come out the other side with a kind of stillness that belongs to people who have been through enough that most things do not disturb them anymore. He stood when she came in. They were roughly the same height. He gestured to one of the chairs. "Please sit down," he said. His voice was lower than she expected, and carried a slight accent, traces of a northern English city he had grown up in, mostly controlled but present in the vowels. She sat. He sat. He looked at her without speaking for a moment. It was not a rude look. It was an assessing one, the look of someone taking the measure of a situation before engaging with it. "I read your letter," he said. "I assumed," she said. A very faint movement near the corner of his mouth. Not a smile exactly. Something preceding one. "You write plainly," he said. "I was trying to," she said. "I didn't want to waste your time with anything complicated." "Most people who want something from me make it complicated," he said. "They build a case, they structure an argument, they present data. I didn't have data," she said. "I just had the situation." He nodded once. "Tell me about the development project," he said. She told him. She told him about the contractor, the insurance dispute, the bank, the timeline of the debt, the compounding interest, the Hartley clause, the wedding that had not happened. She told it as a sequence of facts, without editorializing, without asking for sympathy. She gave him numbers where she had them and acknowledged the gaps where she did not. He listened with the particular quality of someone who is genuinely taking in what is being said, rather than waiting for their turn to speak. It was the kind of listening that is less common than people realize, the kind that creates a specific feeling in the person being listened to, a feeling of being heard rather than simply audible. He asked 4 questions. The first was about her father's current client base. The second was about the specific clause language in the Hartley document. The third was about what she understood regarding Gordon Hartley's motivations in structuring the agreement the way he had. The fourth was, "What do you want to happen?" She looked at him. "I want my family to not lose the house," she said. "And I want my father to be able to keep working without the debt making it impossible." "That's what your family wants," he said. "What do you want?" She was quiet for a moment. This was not a question she had prepared for. Not because it was unexpected exactly, but because it assumed she and her family's situation were separate, and she had not been thinking of herself that way. She had been thinking of herself as inside the situation, part of it, one of the things that needed solving along with the rest. "I don't know," she said. It was the most honest answer she had. He looked at her for a moment. "That's interesting," he said. He did not say it dismissively. He said it the way a person says something when they have encountered a piece of information they did not expect and are filing it carefully for later. He stood. The 12 minutes, she realized, were over. He came around the desk and extended his hand. She stood and shook it. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. He walked to the door and opened it. Petra appeared as if she had been standing just outside, which she probably had been. Nadia walked to the door. She stopped. She turned around. He was still standing there. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask," he said. "Why did you agree to see me? You must receive requests like mine often, probably more compelling ones." He considered this for a moment. "Your letter had no performance in it," he said. "Most letters that come to me are trying to do something. Yours was just telling me something. That's rarer than you would think." She nodded. She walked out. Petra walked her back to the elevator. They went down to the lobby. Petra said goodbye at the elevator door. Nadia walked across the lobby and through the glass doors and out onto the street. She stood on the pavement for a moment. The day was gray and cold and the street was full of the ordinary noise of a city going about its business. Someone was arguing with a delivery driver. A bus went past with a sound like exhaling. A woman in a bright orange coat walked quickly by with headphones in and the specific expression of someone who has a meeting in 4 minutes and is not going to make it. Nadia stood on the pavement. She had no idea what he was going to do. She had no idea if he was going to do anything. She had given him the truth of the situation, answered his questions as honestly as she could, and then been walked out at the end of 12 minutes exactly as Petra had said she would be. She started walking toward the bus stop. 3 days later, a letter arrived at the house. It was on Voss Holdings' letterhead. It was addressed to her, not to her father. She opened it at the kitchen table with her parents sitting across from her. She read it. She read it again. Then she set it down on the table very carefully, the way you set something down when it is more fragile than it looks. And she looked at her parents, and she said, "He's going to help." Her mother leaned forward. Her father was very still. "He'll clear the debt," Nadia said. "All of it. The clause, the interest, all of it. He'll handle Gordon Hartley directly." "And the condition?" her father said. She was quiet for a moment. She looked back at the letter. "He says the only thing he asks is that I stop spending my time solving problems for everyone except myself, and that before the month is out, I answer the question he asked me in the meeting." Her mother frowned. "What question?" Nadia picked up the letter. "What do I want?" she said. Her parents looked at each other. Nadia looked at the letter. It was the smallest, strangest, most disorienting condition she had ever encountered. It was not money. It was not a service. It was not even something that could be verified or measured or handed over in an envelope. It was just a question. And it was the question she had never, not once in 26 years, spent any meaningful time trying to answer. She set the letter down. She looked at the kitchen window, at the ordinary morning light coming through it. She thought about what she wanted. Not what fixed things. Not what helped people. Not what was practical or logical or the right next step. What she actually wanted. She sat there for a long time. Her father said her name quietly. She looked at him. "He's serious?" he said. "He'll do it?" "He'll do it," she said. Her father looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up at her. "You did that," he said. "You wrote a letter to a man you didn't know, and you told him the truth, and he's going to help us." "He's going to help us," she said, "but his condition is for me." Her mother looked at her carefully. "So what do you want?" her mother said, simply, directly, the same question. Nadia looked at the kitchen window. She did not answer immediately. She was going to need more than a moment for this one. She was going to need to sit with it properly, let it unfold the way things unfold when you have spent a long time looking away from them and are finally looking directly. She looked at the letter. Then she looked at her mother. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'm going to find out." The 6 weeks after the letter arrived were unlike any 6 weeks Nadia had lived before. In the first week, her father received a document from Voss Holdings. It was clean and formal, 2 pages, and it informed him that his debt to Gordon Hartley had been acquired by a third party, and that the original terms of the Hartley agreement were no longer in force. It did not explain the mechanism. It did not offer a payment schedule or ask for anything in return. It simply stated the facts and directed any queries to a contact address that turned out, when Fletcher called it, to belong to a quietly efficient legal team that confirmed everything and answered every question without delay. Her father sat with the document for a very long time. Her mother made tea and sat beside him. Nadia went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed and looked at the wall for a while. She had expected to feel relief. And she did feel it, the specific quality of a weight you have been carrying long enough that you had stopped noticing how heavy it was, suddenly gone, and the strange lightness left behind that almost feels like falling. She felt that. But she also felt something she had not expected. She felt the weight of the condition. Not as a burden, as a responsibility she owed not to Calum Voss but to herself. What do you want? She had promised to answer it. More than that, she had agreed, in accepting his help, that the question was worth answering. And now, with the urgent crisis removed, there was nothing left to fill the space the question occupied in her mind. She lay back on the bed. She thought about the question with genuine attention for the first time. Not the first time she had thought about it. She had thought about it every day since the letter arrived. But she had thought about it the way you think about a language you are trying to learn, looking at it from the outside, recognizing its structure without being inside it. This time she tried to step inside. What do you want? Not what was realistic. Not what was available. Not what could be arranged or managed or made to work within the constraints of her current situation. Just, what do you want? She had been a person who organized herself around the needs of other people for so long that this question felt like being asked to navigate a room with no lights. She knew the room was there. She knew there were things in it. She could not see them. She started with the small things. What foods did she actually like? Not the foods she ate because they were convenient or affordable or what was in the house, but the ones she would choose if choosing were the only criterion. She liked fish cooked in a particular way, with lemon and herbs, the kind that required actual attention to prepare. She had not made it in years because it seemed like too much effort for just herself, and her parents would eat whatever was put in front of them without preference. She liked walking in the early morning, before the city was fully awake, the specific quality of streets and light before the day had been fully inhabited. She had not done this in months because she was always tired, and because morning time had been absorbed by her father's correspondence. She liked drawing. She stopped. She liked drawing. Not liked, loved. Loved it with the specific intensity that belongs to things you have been doing since before you understood what it was you were doing. She had been drawing buildings since she was 8 years old, in the margins of school notebooks, on the backs of receipts, on any available surface. She had gone to the architecture program at 20 because it was the most natural possible next step, the way water runs downhill, not a decision so much as a recognition. And she had left it. And she had not gone back. And the reason she had not gone back, she understood now, lying on the bed with the evening coming in through the curtains, was not money, though money had been the first reason. The deeper reason was that she had been so long in the habit of making herself available to whatever was most immediately necessary, that going back had never risen to the level of immediately necessary. It had sat there, in the category of things she was going to do eventually, and eventually had never arrived because there was always something else. This was the habit of not. She did not have a name for it yet, but she was beginning to recognize the shape of it. She sat up. She went to the table in the corner of her room where she kept her old notebooks. She found the sketchbook she had last opened 2 years ago. She opened it to a blank page. She began to draw. She drew for 2 hours. She drew a building she had been thinking about without quite acknowledging she was thinking about it. A corner lot a few streets from the library, where an old warehouse had been demolished and the lot left empty. She had been walking past it for years. She understood, constructing a building in her head every time she passed it, without ever letting herself register that she was doing it. She drew it now. When she looked up, it was almost midnight, and her hand ached pleasantly in the way hands ache when they have been doing the thing they are made for. She looked at the page. She looked at it for a long time. She had her answer. Not the complete answer. Not the version she could put in a sentence and deliver back to Calum Voss as if it were a solved equation, but the beginning of one. The thing she had been looking for, which was not a plan or a decision, but a recognition, the simple understanding of what the room held when you stopped standing in the doorway and actually walked inside. She wanted to draw buildings. She wanted to go back to her program. She wanted to stop treating the thing she loved most as a reward she had not yet earned. She wrote it in the margin of the sketchbook in very small letters, the way you write things when you are not quite ready to let them be loud. Then she closed the sketchbook and went to bed. She slept well for the first time in weeks. In the morning she got up and called Cora. "I have an answer," she said. Cora's voice woke up mid-sentence. "The question?" "Yes. Tell me. Tell me." "Architecture program, spring intake, re-enrollment. That's part of it." A brief silence. "And the other part?" "I want to build something," Nadia said. "Not just design something. Actually build something. Something that exists in the world, and not only on paper." Cora was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel?" she said. "Ridiculous," Nadia said, "and also very sure." "That's usually what real things feel like," Cora said. Nadia looked at the sketchbook on the table beside her. "I also need to send Calum Voss a message," she said, "to tell him I have an answer." "You're going to go back," Cora said. "Yes." "Good," Cora said. "Go." She prepared for 3 more days before she went back to Meridian Street. She wanted to be certain of the answer, not in the sense of having worked it out completely, but in the sense of knowing she was telling the truth about it. She had found, over the past 6 weeks, that the truth of what she wanted had a specific feeling, a solidity, that the versions she had tried before did not have. The previous versions had been, "I want the debt resolved. I want my father to be okay. I want things to be stable." Those were all real, but they were not the answer to the question he had asked. The answer was simpler and harder than any of those. It was, "I want to make things that last." She sent a brief message to the Voss Holdings contact address. It said she had an answer to the question, and she would like to return to give it in person if that was acceptable. The reply came the next morning from Petra. Thursday at 2. She went. She was not nervous the way she had been before the first meeting. She was something else, which she eventually identified as resolved. She had something real to say, and she was going to say it. The meeting was 8 minutes. He had told her that at the start. She did not waste any of them. She sat across from him and she told him what she had found in the sketchbook at midnight, and what the building on the empty lot had taught her, and what the habit of putting herself last had cost her over the years, and what she intended to do about it now that she could see it clearly. He listened in the way he always listened, fully and without performance. When she finished, there was a brief silence. "The program," he said. "Have you applied?" "Not yet," she said. "I printed out the re-entry requirements. I haven't sent the application." "Why not?" She thought about this. "Because I keep waiting to be sure it's allowed," she said. The silence this time was different. He looked at her for a moment. "Would you like coffee?" he said. The coffee was stronger than she was used to, and the view from the window on the 10th floor was not dramatic. A mid-rise city skyline, the kind of view that is interesting without being spectacular, which suited the room and suited the man who occupied it. They sat at the small round table near the window, both chairs angled toward the glass, and Nadia had the distinct feeling of having arrived somewhere she had not planned to go, by taking a series of steps that had each individually seemed like the only available next one. "What stopped you from re-enrolling before?" Calum said. Not accusatory, genuinely curious. He asked questions the way he did everything else, directly and without decoration. "Money first," she said, "then habit. The habit of not." "The habit of not," he repeated. "You get used to not having the thing you want," she said, "and then the not having starts to feel like the natural state, and then wanting it again feels greedy, or unrealistic, or like something you have to earn by first solving everything else." He drank his coffee. "And have you solved everything else?" he said. "No," she said, "but you took away the most urgent part." "I did," he said. "Why?" she said. He looked at her. "Why what?" "Why help a stranger? I'm aware of how these situations usually work. People with your kind of resources and influence don't generally respond to letters from people with no leverage." He was quiet for a moment. He set his coffee down. "Your letter had something in it that I don't encounter often," he said. "You were not trying to convince me of anything. You weren't constructing a version of the situation. You were just telling me what was true, exactly as it was, including the parts that made you or your family look less than ideal." She waited. "That is not common," he said. "Most people, when they need something from someone with the power to give it, present the version of the story that is most advantageous to them. You presented the version that was simply accurate." He paused. "And when I asked what you wanted, you said you didn't know. That is also not common." "It wasn't strategic," she said. I genuinely didn't know. I know, he said. That's why I found it interesting. She looked at her coffee cup. Outside the window, the city was doing what cities do in the late morning, moving with the forward energy of a great many people all going somewhere at once. You described yourself in that meeting as if you were a function, he said. A person who solves things. As if that was the whole of you. And I thought that seemed like a significant waste. She did not answer immediately. She was aware of something shifting quietly in the room. Not dramatically. Just the small, real shift of a conversation going somewhere true. The letter was strange to write, she said. I didn't know if it was the right thing. I had no idea if you would read it, and I didn't have a plan for what would happen if you didn't. I just thought, this is what is real, and this is the only honest thing I have, and if that's enough, it's enough, and if it's not, then at least I did the one honest thing. He was quiet. I have done a great many things in my life for rational reasons, he said after a moment. The letter was not a rational engagement, it was just a true one. That was sufficient. She nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, a comfortable one, the kind that only develops between people who are not performing anything. Send the application, he said. She looked at him. The re-entry application, he said. Send it. Don't wait until it feels permitted. Waiting for permission from no one is a way of never starting. She looked at him for a moment. She thought about asking how he knew that, specifically. She thought about asking what it had cost him to learn it. She thought about a number of things. She did not ask any of them. All right, she said. All right, he repeated. She finished her coffee. She set the cup down. She stood up. He stood up with her, which she had not expected. Thank you, she said, for the coffee, and for the 8 minutes, and for everything before that. You don't need to thank me for the debt, he said. That was a straightforward situation. It wasn't straightforward to us, she said. He nodded once, accepting this. She walked to the door. She stopped, hand on the frame. She did not turn around, but she said, the lot on the corner of Selton and Marsh, the one that's been empty for 3 years. I know it, he said. I've been drawing what I think could go there for 2 years, she said. I don't know if it will ever be relevant, but I've been drawing it. A pause. I would like to see it sometime, he said. She did not answer that. She walked out. In the elevator going down, Nadia stood very still and felt something she had not felt in a very long time, and took a moment to identify correctly. It was not relief. Relief was familiar. She had felt relief many times. This was something different. It was the feeling of moving towards something rather than away from something. She stepped out onto Meridian Street. She took her phone out of her bag. She found the re-entry application for the architecture program. She opened it. She began to fill it in. She stood on the pavement filling in the form with the city moving around her, and she did not care how she looked. A woman standing on a public pavement filling in an online application, with the concentration of someone whose mind is entirely on what is in front of her, which was exactly the truth. The form had a section asking why she had left her previous program and what had changed. She wrote that she had left because of financial constraints and a long-standing habit of making herself last. She wrote that what had changed was not entirely her circumstances but her understanding that waiting for perfect conditions was a way of never beginning. She wrote that she was ready to return because she had recently come to understand, through circumstances she could not have predicted, that the thing she most wanted to do was also the thing she was most capable of doing well, and that these two facts together were reason enough. She submitted the form. She put the phone in her bag. She started walking. The re-entry confirmation arrived 10 days later. The program had reviewed her previous record and was glad to welcome her back. Spring intake. Her previous credits would carry forward. She read the email 3 times. She went to find her father. He was in his small study, which he called an office, even though it was barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs, and the filing cabinet that had been there since before Nadia was born. She stood in the doorway. I've been re-accepted, she said. Architecture program. Spring intake. He looked up from the papers on his desk. She watched him take this in. He had known she had applied. She had told him the morning after she submitted the form, a brief factual statement over breakfast delivered in the tone she would use to mention she had posted a letter. He had nodded and said little. The way he dealt with things he felt deeply about. Good, he said. 1 word. But said in the way of a man who has been worried about his daughter for a long time, and has just been given something to stop worrying about. She smiled at him. Back to work, she said. Back to work, he agreed. She went to the kitchen table. She opened the sketchbook. The building on the corner of Selton and Marsh waited for her, patient, the way buildings in the mind always wait, entirely certain of themselves even before a single brick has been laid. She picked up her pen. She worked for 3 hours. When she finally stopped, it was because her mother called her for dinner, and she stood up and stretched and looked at the evening light in the kitchen, and thought that she could not remember the last time an afternoon had gone so quickly without her noticing. That was the feeling she had been looking for. That was what wanted felt like. The letter arrived on a gray morning in early spring, and Nadia read it twice, standing at the kitchen counter with a cup of tea in one hand and the paper in the other. It was from the architecture program, not the enrollment confirmation, which she already had. This was a letter from a professor in the program named Aldred, who specialized in urban design and who, according to the program's website, had spent 20 years working on mid-density housing in cities exactly like this one. He had seen her re-entry portfolio. He was writing to ask if she would be interested in a studio meeting before the term formally began, to discuss a particular approach he had noticed in her work. She set the letter down. She looked at it. Then she looked at the sketchbook on the table, which she had been working in every day for the past 3 weeks with an intensity that had surprised her. She called the number on the letter. Professor Aldred answered on the 3rd ring. He had the voice of a man who spent a great deal of time outdoors in cold weather, that specific quality of someone accustomed to thinking in large open spaces. He was direct without being abrupt, the way some academics are who have spent enough time with actual buildings to have been cured of the habit of talking around things. Your re-entry portfolio, he said. There's a set of drawings in it, a corner lot. Selton and Marsh, she said. Those drawings are not like the rest of your portfolio work, he said. The rest is competent. These are something else. Where did they come from? She told him about the 2 years of thinking about the lot, about the habit of drawing it without assigning the drawings to any particular purpose, about midnight and the sketchbook and the realization. He was quiet for a moment. Come in Thursday afternoon, he said. Bring the sketchbook. She went in on Thursday. Aldred was a tall man with gray hair cut very short, and the unhurried manner of someone who has learned that urgency applied to creative work makes it worse. He sat across from her in a studio room with drawings pinned to every available wall surface and looked at the sketchbook for a long time without speaking. He turned pages slowly. He went back to the courtyard section. He looked at it. This, he said, pointing to the place where the commercial passage opened into the courtyard. Tell me why here. She told him. He listened. He asked 2 more questions, both of them the kind that go deeper rather than wider, the kind that are not asking for more information, but for the thinking underneath the thinking. She answered them. When she finished, he looked at the sketchbook again. You've been doing this for 2 years, he said. Yes. Without a brief, without an assignment, without anyone asking you to. Yes. He nodded slowly. That's the most important thing I can tell you about the way this program will either serve you or disappoint you, he said. The work you do when no one is asking for it is the work that matters. The program will teach you things you need. It will also try to teach you things you already know, and you will have to hold on to the knowing while you learn the teaching. She thought about this. The corridor approach, she said. The offset layout with the alcoves. I saw it, he said. Is it structurally sound? I've been working on that assumption, but I haven't run the numbers. Come back next week, he said. I'll have someone from the structural team look at it informally. The answer will probably be yes with minor adjustment, but let's find out. She came back the following week. The structural consultation was with a graduate student named Patrick who had the focused quietness of someone who lives very comfortably inside engineering problems. He looked at the corridor drawings for 20 minutes, asked 4 questions, and said the offset configuration was not only structurally feasible, but actually reduced the span requirement on 3 of the floor plates. Did you work this out deliberately? He said. No, she said. I worked it out for the space. The structure came after. He looked at her. That's how you're supposed to do it, he said. Most students learn the structure and then try to fit the space around it. She filed this away. She went home. She sat at the kitchen table. She thought about Calum Voss and the building at Selton and Marsh, and what she had said to him at the doorway. I've been drawing what I think could go there for 2 years. He had said he would like to see it sometime. She had been drawing it more carefully now, since the structural consultation, since the conversation with Aldred, since the understanding that what she had been building in her head was something that could actually be built in the world. She spent 2 evenings photographing the sketchbook pages. She spent a 3rd evening annotating them, writing brief notes beside each drawing that explained the thinking, the decisions, the reasons behind the choices that otherwise might not be readable. She wrote a short note to accompany the photographs. It was very brief. It said she had been meaning to send the drawings and she hoped he would find them interesting, and she did not expect a response but had wanted to follow through on what she had mentioned. She attached the photographs. She sent the email to the contact address on the Voss Holdings letterhead. Then she closed her laptop and went back to the sketchbook. She was working on the roofline. It had been giving her difficulty for a week. Not the engineering of it, but the feeling of it. The relationship between the 6th floor and the sky. A building's roofline is the last conversation it has with the city before it becomes air, and she wanted the conversation to be the right one. She worked until it was late. When she woke the next morning, there was a message waiting. It was from Calum Voss. It said, "I received the drawings. They are worth discussing. Would you be willing to meet again?" She read it. She put the phone down. She looked at the kitchen ceiling. She thought about what worth discussing meant, coming from a man who used words as precisely as he used everything else. She picked up the phone. She typed, "Yes. When works for you?" He replied, "Thursday at 2. She replied, "I'll be there." She put the phone down. She made coffee. She sat with it. Worth discussing. She thought about those 2 words for the rest of the morning. The way you think about something that is small enough to be precise and large enough to mean more than it appears to. Worth discussing did not mean valuable as a piece of student work. Worth discussing did not mean interesting as a concept. It meant what the words said, that there was something in the drawings that required a conversation, and that he was the person who wanted to have it. She thought about the courtyard, the hornbeam trees, the passage that was neither door nor lobby but something between, the apartments with their windows facing both inward and outward, the corridor with its alcoves. She thought about 2 years of drawing something no one had asked for. She went back to the sketchbook. She worked on the roofline. She got it right on Thursday morning, 2 hours before she was supposed to leave for Meridian Street. The roofline found itself, the way things do when you have been holding them long enough, stepping back from a slight lean into something true. She photographed it. She added it to the folder. She went to Meridian Street. She arrived at 158. Petra met her at the elevator. The office on the 10th floor was the same. The desk, the window, the spare clean surfaces. What was different was a small round table near the window that she had not seen on her previous visits, and on the table, a printed copy of her drawings. He had printed them, all 12 pages. She sat down. He sat across from her, between them, her drawings on paper. He looked at the courtyard section. "Tell me about the passage," he said. Not hello, straight to it. She told him. He listened the way he always listened. She told him about the passage's intention, the way it was designed not to bring people into the building, but to bring people through it, to make the commercial space and the courtyard something you moved through rather than entered. Threshold architecture, she said. The goal is to make the transition between the street and the courtyard feel voluntary rather than architectural. Meaning the building shouldn't feel like it's pulling you in. It should feel like you chose to come. He looked at the drawing. The courtyard itself, he said. You've specified trees. Hornbeams. They're narrow enough for the footprint, and they hold their shape in winter. The courtyard needs to feel inhabited year-round. He turned to the corridor section. She told him about the alcoves. He asked 2 questions. Both went to the structural implications. She answered them with the information from Patrick's consultation. He was quiet for a moment. "You had this reviewed," he said. "Informally," she said. "A structural engineering student at the program." He confirmed the feasibility. He looked at the drawing. "The lot," he said. He paused. She waited. "Voss Holdings acquired it 8 months ago," he said. "I had a feasibility assessment done. The results were not interesting." She looked at him. "We own the lot," he said. She was very still. "The standard development proposal maximized footprint and residential density," he said. "I set it aside because the result would have been another unremarkable building, in an area that doesn't need more unremarkable buildings." He turned a page. He looked at the roofline drawing she had finished that morning. "This is not an unremarkable building," he said. She said nothing. "I want to propose something," he said. "And I want you to tell me honestly if you are interested or if you are not. I won't take a polite answer if that's not the accurate one." She met his eyes. "All right," she said. "I would like you to develop this concept as a formal commission," he said. "With appropriate fees. Conceptual lead. My development team handles the engineering and structure. The design direction is yours. A silence. She looked at the drawings between them. She looked at him. "Can I think about it?" she said. "Of course," he said. "How much time?" "A reasonable amount," he said. "But don't wait until it feels permitted." She recognized those words. They were the same words he had said to her in the same room several weeks ago about the re-entry application. The corner of his mouth moved. She gathered the drawings carefully and put them back in her folder. She stood up. He stood with her. She walked to the door. She did not stop this time. She rode down in the elevator and walked out into the afternoon and stood on the pavement and looked at the street. She was going to say yes. She had known it before she stood up from the table. But the decision deserved to be held for at least a few days, tested, given the chance to feel wrong if it was going to. She turned and looked back at the building. 12 floors. She turned back to the street. She started walking. She had a bus to catch and a sketchbook to open. The decision had already been made in the room. She just needed to let it settle before she said it out loud. She said yes 3 days later in an email that was 5 lines long. The formal documents from Voss Holdings arrived the following morning. She read them twice, slowly, with the same attention she gave to anything with numbers in it. They were straightforward. The fee was fair, more than fair for someone at her stage. The arrangement was what he had described: conceptual lead, with full design authority over the building's form and character, engineering and structural handled by the Voss team. The timeline was reasonable. She signed them. She sent them back. Then she called Professor Aldred. "I have a commission," she said. A brief pause. "For the Selton and Marsh drawings?" he said. "Yes." "Who commissioned it?" "Voss Holdings," she said. "They own the lot." Another pause. Longer this time. "Calum Voss," Aldred said. "You know him?" she said. "I know of him," Aldred said. "He built something in the southern part of the city about 4 years ago. A mixed-use development. People still talk about it. He makes decisions differently from most developers." "How so?" she said. "He builds for what the city needs rather than what the market says will sell," Aldred said, which sounds simple but is actually very rare. She thought about what Calum had said about the feasibility assessment, about unremarkable buildings in areas that didn't need more of them. "I'll need support from the program," she said. "Is that possible? Working on a real project while enrolled?" "More than possible," Aldred said. "It's exactly what this program is supposed to produce." She had the first working meeting with the Voss engineering team 2 weeks after signing the documents. The meeting was held in a conference room on the 8th floor of the Voss Holdings building, a room she had not been in before, with a large table and drawings already pinned to the walls, the standard site survey, and the original feasibility assessment that Calum had mentioned setting aside. There were 3 engineers. The lead was a woman named Claire, mid-40s, with the focused energy of someone who has been building things for a long time and enjoys it without needing to perform the enjoyment. The other 2 were younger and quieter and took careful notes. Nadia had brought the full sketchbook and the annotated photographs. Claire looked at the corridor drawings first. "The offset layout," she said. "Yes," Nadia said. "This reduces the span on 3 floor plates," Claire said. "That's what a structural review suggested," Nadia said. "Informal. I'd like your team to verify it formally." "We will," Claire said. She looked at the courtyard. "This passage, how wide are you intending it to be?" They worked through it. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, Nadia had a list of technical questions that needed answers before the concept could progress, and Claire had a list of design intentions that the engineering team needed to understand before they could begin the structural plan. It was, Nadia thought walking to the elevator afterward, exactly what a working collaboration was supposed to feel like. 2 kinds of expertise talking to each other with mutual respect and the shared understanding that the building they were trying to make was more important than either of their individual preferences. She ran into Calum in the lobby on the way out. He had the air of someone coming in from outside, a slight sharpness in his face from the cold, a folder under his arm. He saw her and stopped. "Meeting with Claire?" he said. "Yes," she said. "It went well. I have a list of questions." "Good," he said. "Questions are better than certainties at this stage." She thought about this. "That's not how I was taught to think about questions," she said. "How were you taught?" "That questions meant you hadn't worked something out yet. That certainty was the goal." He looked at her. "Certainty is the goal after the building is standing," he said. "Before that, questions are how you find the right building." She filed this carefully. "I'll have an updated concept to send by end of next week," she said. Take the time it needs, he said. She went back to work. The weeks that followed had a quality she had not experienced before. Not the quality of managing something, which was the mode she had spent most of her adult life in. The quality of building something. Every day added to the thing in a way that was visible, the building becoming more real on the page and in the technical documents and in the conversations with Claire and with Aldred and with the graduate student Patrick, who had become a regular presence in her work, appearing occasionally to check a structural assumption or to offer a calculation she had been stuck on. She went to the site most Thursdays. The corner of Selton and Marsh was a particular place at 7 in the morning, which was when she liked to go, before the traffic built and when the light came from the east and showed the lot in the specific way that revealed what the space was doing, how it related to the buildings beside it, how the street curved slightly at that corner in a way the original warehouse had never acknowledged. She stood on the corner and looked. She looked the way she had been looking for 2 years, but different now, with the weight of the commission behind it, with Claire's structural questions in her notebook, with Aldred's voice saying the work you do when no one is asking for it is the work that matters. She had gone from no one asking to someone asking. She had not expected the added weight to feel like freedom, but it did. She told this to Cora one evening at dinner. Because you're not carrying the asking, Cora said. You're being asked. Someone else is doing the carrying. Nadia thought about this. Calum, she said. Yes, Cora said. She looked at Nadia carefully. How is that going? The working relationship. Well, Nadia said, he's very clear about what he wants from the project, and very uninterested in managing how I get there. He asks good questions. He doesn't offer opinions I didn't ask for. And personally, Cora said. Nadia was quiet for a moment. He had coffee with me after the first working meeting, she said. We talked for an hour about the design, and then about other things. He asked about the program. I told him about Aldred, and about Patrick. He listened the way he always listens. And, Cora said. And nothing specific happened, Nadia said. It was just a conversation. But it had the quality of a conversation between two people who are both interested in what the other person is saying. That is something specific, Cora said. Nadia looked at her. I know, she said. She had been aware of it for several weeks. The quality of the working relationship had a weight to it that was not only professional. She had tried to assess this honestly and without projection, which was difficult because projection is exactly what you do when you are in the habit of managing outcomes and you encounter something you cannot manage. She could not manage what she felt when she was in the room with him. She could describe it. It was attention. It was the specific feeling of being seen clearly by someone who is under no obligation to look. That was all she could say about it with certainty. Everything else she was leaving in the category of information she did not yet have enough context to interpret. She went back to the sketchbook. She worked on the 6th floor. The 2 rooftop apartments needed to feel different from the floors below, quieter, more private, with the sense of being above the city rather than inside it. She had been turning this over for days. She got it right on a Wednesday afternoon when she was not trying to get it right, which was the only time things got right. She drew it. She looked at it. She photographed it and sent it to Claire for structural review and to Aldred for design review and, on an impulse she did not fully analyze, to Calum Voss with a brief note that said she had solved the 6th floor. His reply came within the hour. It said, Thursday morning, bring the sketchbook, I'll bring coffee. She looked at the message. Thursday morning was not a meeting day. Thursday was a site visit day. She typed back, site first or office first. He replied, site, 7:30. Then the office. She looked at the message. She understood that this was not simply a working meeting. The working meetings had a structure. They had Claire and notes and agendas and lists of questions. What he was describing was something different. A morning at the site and then a conversation in the office about the drawings. The kind of engagement that did not have an agenda. She typed, 7:30. She put the phone down. She looked at the sketchbook. She looked at the building that was becoming, page by page and day by day, something that was going to be real. She picked up her pen. She kept working. The corner of Selton and Marsh at 7:25 in the morning was cold and very quiet, the specific quiet of a city that has not yet fully woken up, with only the occasional vehicle and 1 or 2 people moving with the contained energy of people who are already where they are going. Nadia was there before him. She had not been nervous about the wedding. She had not been nervous about the first meeting on the 10th floor. She had not been nervous about the commission, or the working meetings, or the structural review, or any of it. She was slightly nervous now, standing on a cold corner with her sketchbook under her arm, which told her something she had been uncertain about for several weeks but was now quite clear on. He arrived at 7:30 exactly. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was wearing a dark coat and had the particular quality of someone who is comfortable in cold weather, neither fighting it nor performing indifference to it. He handed her a cup. "Thank you," she said. They stood side by side and looked at the lot. It was not an obviously promising piece of ground. It was a cleared space with a temporary fence around it, and the particular blankness of somewhere that has been waiting long enough to have gotten used to the waiting. The buildings beside it were a hardware supplier on one side and a converted residential row on the other, the mix of functions that gave that part of the city its unsettled, transitional quality. "Tell me what you see," Caleb said. She looked at the lot. She had stood here many times. She knew the lot at different times of day, in different light, in different weather. She knew how the morning sun moved across it, and where the shadow from the adjacent building fell in the afternoon, and what the street felt like from the center of the empty space. She told him. She told him about the curve in the road at that corner, and how it created a natural pause in the street, a slight widening of the visual field. She told him about the way the eastern light came in at this time of morning, low and direct. She told him about the height relationship between the lot and the buildings beside it, and why the 6th-floor decision was right, and not 5 and not 7. He listened. He asked her twice to point to what she was describing, and each time she pointed, and he looked with the focused quality of someone learning the specific geography of a place they intend to do something with. They stayed at the corner for 40 minutes. They walked to the office. They went up to the 10th floor. The sketchbook was spread on the round table and she walked him through the sequence of decisions that had led to the current drawings, not as a presentation, but as a narration of thinking. How the passage had come before the courtyard. How the courtyard had made the corridor solution obvious. How the corridor solution had then changed the roofline. He asked questions throughout. They were the same kind of questions he always asked, precise and going to the root of things. An hour and a half passed without either of them noticing. He refilled the coffee. She was in the middle of explaining the 6th floor when she stopped. He looked at her. "What?" he said. "I just want to make sure this is actually a good building," she said. "Not just interesting, good." He was quiet for a moment. "Those aren't different things," he said. "If it's genuinely interesting, it's because it's genuinely right. Buildings that are right for their place are interesting the same way a correctly solved problem is interesting." She looked at him. "Have you always thought that way about buildings?" she said. "I've always thought that way about problems," he said. "Buildings were later." "When did you start caring about buildings?" He looked at the drawing on the table. "When I built the first one," he said. "I had been buying and selling property for 3 years before I built anything. The first time I built something, I understood that the buying and selling had been a preparation for a thing I hadn't known I was preparing for." She thought about this. "Like the drawings," she said. "How so?" "I was drawing that building for 2 years before I knew I was preparing for anything," she said. "It felt like habit. It turned out to be the beginning of something." He looked at her. The room was very quiet. She became aware, sitting at the round table with the coffee and the drawings between them, that she was in a moment that she would remember. Not because of its drama, there was no drama in it, because of its quality. The quality of being completely in the right place. She had not felt that very often. She held it carefully. "The program," he said. "You start in the spring." "Yes. And the commission continues alongside it." "Yes. Aldred has confirmed the program is supportive. It's actually good for my portfolio. You're going to be very busy," he said. "I know." A brief silence. "Good busy or bad busy?" he said. She thought about this. "I used to always be busy," she said. "It was always bad busy. The kind where the busy is filling a space that would otherwise be uncomfortable. And now, this is different," she said. "This is the kind where the busy is the point, not a distraction from something else." He nodded. She finished her coffee. She began gathering the drawings. He watched her with the full attention quality she had come to know. She looked up. He was looking at her with an expression that was not the professional assessing look, and was not the intellectual engagement look. It was something she had not seen from him before, and she took a moment to read it. She read it accurately. She put the last drawing in the folder. She looked at him. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to answer honestly." "Always," he said. "What we're doing here," she said. "The commission, the working relationship, is that the only thing it is?" A brief silence. Not the silence of someone searching for the diplomatic answer. The silence of someone who respects a direct question enough to give it a direct response. No, he said. She looked at him. And you've been aware of that for longer than I have, she said. Probably, he said. Why didn't you say so? Because you had other things to sort out first, he said, and because it was more important for you to come to it on your own terms than for me to offer it. She thought about this. She thought about the 12 minutes and the question, and the letter, and the drawings, and the Tuesday morning on the corner of Selton and Marsh with 2 cups of coffee. She thought about the 11 years with Owen and the wedding that did not happen, and the kitchen table at 2 in the morning with her father. She thought about the sketchbook. She thought about what wanted felt like. I haven't done this well before, she said. I know, he said. You've been with someone who leaned on you. That's not the same thing as being with someone. Is that what this would be? She said. Someone. That's what I would want it to be, he said, if you do. She looked at him. She trusted him, she realized, not because of the debt or the commission. Those had been acts of good judgment on his part, and perhaps on hers. She trusted him because in every conversation they had ever had, he had said exactly what was true, and not one word more, and she had learned to read the economy of his language as a kind of precision that most people spent their whole lives without achieving. He was not going to lean on her. He was not going to manage her, or position himself carefully in relation to her, or offer her a version of himself that was designed to be appealing. He was just going to tell her what was true. She thought that was enough. More than enough. Yes, she said. He looked at her. Something in his expression changed, very slightly. The specific change of a person who has been holding something carefully for a while and is now allowed to put it down. All right, he said. All right, she said. She stood up. He stood up. She picked up her folder. I'll have the updated structural drawings to Claire by Friday, she said. Good, he said. She walked to the door. She stopped. She turned around. She was not going to stop in doorways forever, but for now, one more time. Thursday morning, she said, same time. I want to show you how the light changes on the lot in the afternoon. It matters for the window placement. I'll be there, he said. She went out. In the elevator, she stood with the folder under her arm, and the 2 empty coffee cups in the bin by the elevator door, and the clean, clear feeling of someone who has said the exact true thing at exactly the right moment. She stepped out onto Meridian Street. The day had warmed slightly. She walked to the bus stop. She had work to do. Owen came back on a Thursday evening in October. His car appeared on the street at 6:15 when the light was already going dark and Nadia was walking home from the bus stop with her sketchbook under her arm, having spent the afternoon at the site with the particular tiredness that comes from a day of good work. She saw the car before she saw him. She recognized it the same way you recognize the cars of people who have been in your life for a long time. Without effort, the knowledge simply there before you look. He was standing at the end of the garden path. He saw her from a distance. She kept walking at the same pace. Nadia, he said, when she reached him. Hello, Owen, she said. She was not afraid of this conversation. She was not dreading it. She was, if she was honest with herself, faintly tired by the anticipation of it, which told her something useful about how she felt. When you dread a conversation with someone, some part of you still cares about the outcome. When you are tired by it, you are past caring about the outcome, and have arrived at simply wanting it to be over. Can we talk? He said. Yes, she said. Come inside. Her mother was in the kitchen. She saw Owen come in with the expression of a woman who had been expecting this and had made peace with it. She excused herself with the quiet efficiency of someone who knows when a room needs fewer people in it. Nadia sat in the armchair. Owen sat on the sofa. He looked the same. He had always looked the same. This had never been the problem. I should have called, he said. You could have, she said. I would have spoken to you. I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear from me. I would have spoken to you, she said again. He looked at his hands. I wanted to apologize properly, he said, not by message. In person. I accept your apology, she said. He looked up. That easily? He said. It's not easy, she said. I've had months to get to accepting it. The time did most of the work. He nodded. He looked at the room, the familiar room of a house he had been in many times over many years, and she watched him take it in with the expression of someone encountering something that used to be ordinary and is now defined by its absence from his life. Celia and I ended, he said. She waited. I'm not saying that to suggest anything, he said. I just thought you should know. All right, she said. I panicked, he said. On the day. I had been panicking for weeks, and I couldn't find a way to say it, and the day arrived and I made the worst possible decision. I know that. You made a decision that told me something I needed to know, she said. I won't say it didn't hurt, but I'm not angry about it anymore. He looked at her. She could see he was searching her face for evidence of performance, for the controlled presentation of fineness that people sometimes put on when they are not fine. He did not find it, because it was not there. She was genuinely, straightforwardly all right. You seem different, he said. I am different, she said. That happens. Different how? She thought about how to answer this. I know what I want, she said. I didn't before. I do now. He was quiet for a moment. She thought about Calem's question, not the one he had asked her, the one she had asked him, the same question, mirrored back across the months. She thought about what it would sound like directed at Owen. She had been planning to ask it. She found, sitting here, that she did not need to. She could see the answer already. Owen was someone who organized his life around the things nearest to him, the expectations of his family, the shape of the relationship he was already in, the available path. He was not a person who had ever sat alone at midnight and asked himself what he actually wanted, and then stayed with the silence until the real answer arrived. He would not have known how. This was not a flaw. It was a shape. Some people were built toward clarity, and some were not, and the ones who were not did not become the ones who were through encouragement or exposure or being left alone at an altar. She was not angry at his shape. She had just outgrown the space it left for her. I'm going back to my architecture program, she said. Spring intake. I have a commission on a building I've been working on. He looked at her. That's what you wanted, he said. When we were at school, you were always drawing buildings. Yes, she said. He was quiet. I'm glad, he said. He meant it. She could hear that he meant it. Thank you, she said. They sat for a moment in the particular silence of two people who have been important to each other and are now in the process of becoming something else, the something else that comes after importance, which is not nothing but is not what it was. Is there someone? He said. She looked at him. That's not something I'm going to talk to you about, she said gently. He nodded. He understood. He stood up. She stood with him. They walked to the door together, 12 steps through the hallway, past the photograph on the wall and the coat rack and the doormat with the worn corner that she had been meaning to replace for a year. She opened the door. He stepped outside. He turned. I did love you, he said. I want you to know that. I know, she said. I loved you too. She meant both things. Past tense was accurate. The love had been real. It had also been, for both of them, insufficient to the task of what the future required. Goodbye, Owen, she said. Goodbye, Nadia. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment. She thought about 11 years. She thought about borrowed pens and long drives and the specific texture of a relationship that has been the fabric of your daily life and is now simply memory. She thought about what memory was for, not for going back, but for understanding what you have learned. She had learned that she needed someone who looked at her and saw a person, not a function, someone who asked what she wanted and waited for the real answer, someone who did not lean. Her mother appeared from the kitchen. He's gone, Nadia said. I see that, her mother said. He apologized. I accepted it. We said goodbye. Her mother looked at her carefully. And, she said. And I'm fine, Nadia said, genuinely fine, the real kind. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll put the kettle on. Yes, Nadia said. Please. She hung up her coat. She went to the kitchen. She sat at the table with the sketchbook still under her arm. She opened it. She looked at the current drawings of the 6th floor, the 2 rooftop apartments with their windows facing both the sky and the courtyard below, the quiet spaces she had been designing for people who wanted to be above things without being separate from them. She thought about what Calem had said when she had described the 6th floor to him. He had said, those are the apartments for people who have figured something out. She had asked him what he meant. He had said, you put the clarity at the top. She had not said anything to that. She had simply looked at the drawing and understood that he was right. She had done exactly that, without knowing she was doing it, which was how the best decisions worked. Her mother put the tea on the table. Nadia wrapped both hands around the cup. Outside the kitchen window, the street was dark and the houses across from them had their lights on, and a neighbor's cat was moving along the top of the garden wall with the careful purpose of an animal that knows exactly where it is going. She drank her tea. She thought about Thursday. She thought about the site at 7:30, and the coffee, and the morning light on the lot, and the conversation they would have walking back to the office. She thought about what it felt like to be moving towards something. She finished her tea. She put the cup in the sink. She picked up the sketchbook and went to the front room table where the good light was, and she opened it, and she kept working. The building was almost fully designed now. It was not finished. Buildings were never finished in the design stage the way you finished other things. They were completed by building, by the actual physical reality of concrete and stone and glass and people moving through the spaces that had been imagined and then made real. But the thinking was nearly done. The decisions were nearly all made. She was drawing the entrance to the passage when her phone lit up on the table beside her. A message from Calum. It said, "The planning submission goes in next week. First stage review in 8 weeks. Are you ready?" She looked at the message. She thought about 2 years of drawing something no one had asked for. She typed back, "Yes." She put the phone down. She picked up her pen. She kept drawing. The spring enrollment letter arrived on a morning that was cold enough to see your breath, and Nadia stood at the kitchen window with it in her hand and read it twice before setting it beside the kettle. The letter confirmed everything: her full re-enrollment, the carried forward academic credit, her studio group, her first-term project, the start date, which was 6 weeks away. She made a second cup of tea. She sat at the kitchen table with the sketchbook open and the enrollment letter beside it, and for a moment she simply looked at the two things together, the thing she was building and the knowledge that she was going back to learn how to build it better. They sat well together. Her father came downstairs. He saw the letter on the table. He picked it up and read it and set it down carefully. 6 weeks, he said. 6 weeks, she said. He sat across from her. He looked at the sketchbook drawings. He had been looking at the drawings more often lately, stopping at the kitchen table on his way past to study whatever page was open. He never said very much about them. He did not need to. He had spent 30 years making buildings, and he could read drawings the way some people read books, seeing not just the lines but what the lines intended. "The passage," he said, pointing to the section drawing. "Yes," she said. He looked at it. "Your grandfather built passages," he said, "between buildings, not through them. Little covered walkways connecting things. He thought cities needed more of those." She had not known this. She looked at the drawing. "I didn't know that," she said. "You were young when he died," her father said, "but you sat with him when he drew. You were about 4. She thought about this. She thought about what ran through families in ways that were not genes exactly, but were something similar: patterns of attention, ways of looking at the world, the specific direction in which a person's interest moved. "Did you know?" she said. "When I started drawing buildings as a kid, did you know what it meant?" He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "I knew exactly what it meant." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because telling a person what they are is more likely to frighten them off it than anything else," he said. "You have to let people find the thing for themselves." She thought about 12 minutes on the 10th floor. She thought about a question. "Calum said something similar," she said, "about not offering things before someone is ready to receive them." Her father looked at her. "You trust him?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Good," her father said, simply, the way he said things that meant a great deal. She smiled. "Back to work," she said. "Back to work," he agreed. She spent the morning on the drawings and the afternoon on the program schedule. She had been mapping how the commission work and the coursework would sit alongside each other, and the picture was full but not impossible. Aldred had been involved in the planning and had confirmed that the commission counted toward her practical portfolio. Claire had confirmed that the working meetings could be arranged around her class schedule. It was going to require careful management of time. She had been carefully managing time for most of her adult life. The difference was that this time she was managing it for things that were hers. She sent the updated corridor drawings to Claire. She sent a progress note to Aldred. She sent the most recent roofline revision to Calum with a note that said, "For the planning submission." His reply came quickly. It said, "Come in tomorrow morning. I want to go through the submission package before it goes to planning." She replied, 9 o'clock. She put the phone down. She went back to the sketchbook. She worked on the courtyard trees. The hornbeams had been specified from the beginning, but she had been refining the planting arrangement, the specific spacing that would allow them to grow into each other over time without competing, the way trees in old courtyards did, creating a shared canopy rather than a set of separate individual trees. A building was not only what happened when it was first built, It was what happened over years, the way the plantings grew, and the stone weathered, and the patina of use settled over the surfaces. She had been thinking about this more since Calum had talked about building for what the city needed, which was different from building for the market that currently existed. The market changed. The city's needs were slower and more durable. She was designing a building that would be better in 20 years than it was on the day it opened. She was not sure she had the skill to guarantee that yet, but she was learning. At 9 the following morning, she was at 44 Meridian Street. Petra met her at the elevator. The office on the 10th floor had the planning submission documents spread across the round table, a large format printout of the site plan, the section drawings, the elevation drawings, the supporting notes. Calum was standing by the table looking at the section when she came in. He looked up. "The passage height," he said without preamble. She sat down. They worked through the submission package for an hour and 40 minutes. It was the most technical conversation they had had, going page by page through the documents, checking that the written specifications matched the drawings, that the drawings matched the design intent, that the design intent was clear enough to survive review by people who had not been present for any of the thinking that had produced it. This was the test that everything had been building toward. The thinking had to be translated into a form that would survive contact with the planning process, which was not about the quality of the idea, but about whether the idea was legible to people whose job was to assess compliance and impact and technical adequacy. She had been preparing for this. She answered every question clearly. When they finished, Calum looked at the spread of documents on the table. "This is a good submission," he said. She looked at the documents. "Yes," she said. "Not just technically good," he said. "The design rationale is clear. The planning team will understand what you're trying to do and why." She looked at the section drawing, the passage, the courtyard, the hornbeams in their spacing. "My grandfather built passages," she said, "between buildings. My father told me this morning." He looked at her. She looked at the drawing. "I didn't know when I designed this one," she said. "I found out afterward. I think that's how inherited things work. You carry them without knowing, and then one day you look at what you've made and there it is." He was quiet for a moment. "What did you carry from him?" she said. "Your grandfather, or whoever it was." He thought about this. "Stubbornness," he said. "My father. He was a man who had very little, and held on to what he had with everything he had. I carried that. I turned it into something different, but it started as the same quality." She looked at him. "Stubbornness as a gift," she said. "Most gifts arrive as something else," he said. She thought about the dress she had worn at the wedding, and the eggs she had eaten at the diner afterward, and the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and the 4-page letter written in the dark, and the 12 minutes, and the question. She thought about all the things that had arrived as something else, and turned into something she needed. She looked at the submission documents. "When will planning respond?" she said. 8 weeks for the first stage, he said. "Then another 4 for any revisions they require." "And construction?" "If planning approves, construction starts in the spring," he said. "You would be in your first term." She thought about this. Standing on the corner of Selton and Marsh in the spring, watching the first foundations go in, walking the site on Tuesday mornings before lectures, seeing the passage take shape in concrete and brick and the actual weight of real material. She thought about the hornbeam trees being planted in the courtyard. She thought about what the courtyard would look like in 10 years, when the trees had grown into each other, and the space had been inhabited long enough to have a character that was not designed but accumulated. She would be 36. She thought about who she would be at 36. "Are you all right?" Calum said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I was thinking about what the building will look like in 10 years. "Thinking about it is the right thing to do," he said. "Most people building buildings don't think about 10 years. They think about opening day." "I don't care about opening day," she said. "I care about the morning 15 years from now, when someone who lives in one of those apartments comes down through the passage on their way to wherever they're going, and stops for a moment in the courtyard, because something about it made them stop, not because they were planning to, just because the space held them for a moment." He was looking at her. "That's what you're designing for," he said. "Yes," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I knew from the letter," he said. She looked at him. "That you were building for that," he said. "Before I'd seen a drawing, I knew from the letter." She thought about 4 pages written at 4 in the morning. The plain language, the truth of the situation without performance. She thought about what he had said. "Your letter was just telling me something. That's rarer than you would think." She understood now what he had been telling her when he said that. He had been telling her that the quality she had put into the letter, the clarity and the honesty and the refusal to construct a version of herself that was designed to be appealing, was the same quality she had put into the building. They came from the same source. She had been building for a long time without knowing it. The building on the corner of Selton and Marsh was not the first thing she had ever built. It was the first time she had been allowed to see that she was building. She looked at the drawings on the table. She thought about the enrollment letter beside the kettle at home. She thought about a program that was going to teach her things she needed and some things she already knew. She thought about 6 weeks, and spring, and the site at 7:30 on a clear morning with 2 cups of coffee and the light coming from the east. She thought about passages between things. She gathered the submission documents and stacked them carefully. She looked up at Calum. He was looking at her with the expression she knew, the one that was not the assessing look and was not the intellectual engagement, and was the third thing, the one that had taken her some time to read correctly, and that she could read now without any difficulty. 6 weeks, she said, until I start. I know, he said. The submission will be in review by then. Yes. I'm going to want to visit the site while planning is reviewing, she said, more than once. I know, he said. She looked at him. You're not going to try to manage my schedule, she said. No, he said. Good, she said. She picked up her folder. She stood up. He stood up with her. She walked to the door. She stopped. She turned around. She was done stopping in doorways. She walked back to the table. She looked at him. He was a man who had grown up with very little and built something from nothing, and learned that stubbornness, inherited from a father who also had very little, was a quality that could be transformed into something if you knew how to use it. He was a man who asked one question and meant it completely, and waited for the real answer without fidgeting. He was a man who had looked at a 4-page letter from a stranger and found in it something worth responding to. He was the most clear person she had ever met. She had been, her whole life, surrounded by people who needed her to carry things. He did not need her to carry anything. He needed her to show up and be exactly what she was. She thought that was the thing she had been waiting to find without knowing she was looking for it. The building is going to be good, she said. I know, he said. I'm going to make sure of it, she said. I know that too, he said. She looked at him. All right, she said. All right, he said. She walked to the elevator. She rode down. She stepped out onto Meridian Street. The morning was bright and cold, and the trees along the street had their first new leaves, the particular green of early spring, the specific color of things beginning. She walked toward the bus stop. She walked without hurrying. She had 6 weeks before the program started. She had a submission in review, and a building that was going to go up on the corner of Selton and Marsh where an old warehouse had been, and then nothing had been, and now something was going to be again. She had a sketchbook with hornbeam trees in it and a corridor with alcoves and a passage designed to let you choose to come in rather than pull you. She had learned what she wanted. She was going toward it. And the building that did not yet exist waited on its corner, the way things wait when someone has decided to make them real, patient and unhurried, and entirely certain that the morning would come when the first stone was laid. She reached the bus stop. She took out her phone. She opened the sketchbook app she used for quick sketches. She began to draw. She was drawing the corner at Selton and Marsh from memory, the specific curve of the road, the way the eastern light would fall on the facade she had designed, the passage entrance with its deliberate threshold, the suggestion of the courtyard beyond. The bus came. She got on. She kept drawing. She had work to do. Nadia had never been good at doing nothing. Even as a child, her mother had commented on it with the mixture of pride and mild concern that parents reserve for traits that are useful in the world and hard on the person who carries them. She had always needed to be working on something, a drawing, a calculation, a reorganization of a space that did not strictly need reorganizing. Her hands required occupation, and her mind required a problem, and on the occasions when neither was available, she became restless in a way that expressed itself as a kind of interior buzzing, not unhappiness exactly, more like static on a radio that has not found its frequency. After the wedding that did not happen, after the kitchen conversation with her father and the document with the numbers and the name Calum Voss written in the margin of a notebook, she had channeled the buzzing into the most productive direction available to her, which was the problem at hand. But there were evenings. There were evenings when the problem had been worked as far as it could be worked for that day, and the notebooks were closed, and her parents had gone to bed, and the house was quiet in the way houses are quiet late at night. with the specific silence of a building settling into itself, small sounds that are not concerning but are present. On those evenings she would sometimes go and stand at the back door of the house and look at the garden. The garden was not dramatic. It was a small rectangular space with the roses along the back fence and the herb bed and the 2 chairs and the table with the wobble. It had been her mother's project for 20 years, maintained with the patient attention of someone who understood that things do not grow without being seen to, that neglect and growth are not compatible. She would stand at the back door and look at the garden and think about 11 years. She did not think about Owen with anger. The anger had been there, briefly, in the first days after the wedding, a clean and useful thing that had done its job of getting her off the floor and into the kitchen and writing in notebooks, and then it had done its job and gone. What was left was more complicated and less specific. It was the texture of having been, for a very long time, the person in a relationship who did the maintaining, the one who noticed, the one who planned and organized and made sure the small essential things were handled so that the whole thing could continue running. She had been the person who ran the relationship the way her mother ran the garden. She had not minded it at the time. She had not even identified it at the time. It had simply been the natural expression of who she was and what she did. But standing at the back door on those quiet evenings, she began to map it, to trace the pattern backward through the 11 years and find all the places where she had maintained something rather than been maintained. The holidays she had planned, the family events she had remembered, the conversations she had initiated when things between them had gone quiet and needed attention, the times she had looked at his face and understood something was wrong before he had said it, and had arranged herself to address the wrong thing, and had addressed it, and had received his relief and his gratitude and had felt, in that moment, useful. Useful. She turned the word over. She had spent a long time feeling most herself when she was useful. She was beginning to understand that being most yourself when you are useful to others is not the same thing as being most yourself. She was beginning to understand the difference. The garden was very quiet on those evenings. The roses were past their season and the chairs were slightly damp from the cold, and the herb bed had gone dormant in the autumn chill. But her mother visited it every morning anyway, checking the soil and the drainage and the small necessary conditions that kept things alive through the months when growing was not happening. Nadia stood at the back door and thought that this was probably what she was doing too. Standing in the dormant season, waiting for the conditions that permitted growth, not passively, but actively, in the way of someone who understands that preparation and action are not opposites but consecutive parts of the same effort. She went inside. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table. She opened the sketchbook to the drawing of the building and she added a small detail she had been thinking about. A single planter at the passage entrance, visible from the street, designed to be tended by whoever occupied the nearest commercial space. Something that invited maintenance. Something that asked to be seen to. She drew it carefully. She looked at it for a while. Then she closed the sketchbook and went to bed. The first time Nadia sat in Professor Aldred's structural engineering seminar, she was the oldest person in the room by 2 years, and the only one who had not come directly from her undergraduate program. The seminar room was on the 2nd floor of the program building, a mid-century building that had been renovated twice and still showed both renovations in its bones, the original proportions of the windows and the later addition of the mezzanine level visible at the same time, a building that had been added to without being transformed, which she found both aesthetically interesting and professionally instructive. She sat in the 3rd row. She had arrived early, which was her habit, and had the particular experience of watching a room fill up around her. The particular demographic of an architecture studio in its 3rd year, young and confident and already developing the specific idiom of design students, the considered casualness and the strong opinions and the portfolios carried under arms like weapons. She had been this. She had been 20, and in this room, or a room very like it, with the portfolio and the opinions and the forward energy of someone who had just discovered the language they were going to speak for the rest of their life. She was 26 now and she had left and come back and the language was the same but her relationship to it was different. She was not discovering it. She was returning to it, which was a different experience entirely. The difference between finding something for the first time and finding it again after you had thought it was lost. Aldred came in 5 minutes after the official start time, which she would come to understand was characteristic, not tardiness but a deliberate practice of letting a room settle before entering it. He looked around the room. His gaze stopped briefly on Nadia, not in a pointed way, but in the way of someone checking a list against reality and finding them in agreement. He began without preamble. He began with a question. He said, What is the most important structural decision in any building? The room offered the expected answers: foundation depth, load distribution, material selection. Aldred waded through all of them. He said, "The decision of where not to put structure." The room absorbed this. He said, "Every structure is a negotiation between what holds the building up and what the building is for. The negotiation happens at every stage. The job of a structural engineer is to hold up the building with as little material as possible, in as few places as possible, so that the building can be what it needs to be. The job of a designer is to understand that constraint and use it. Designers who don't understand the constraint fight it. Designers who do understand it use it to find forms they would not have found otherwise." Nadia wrote this down. She wrote it down very carefully, in her small, neat handwriting, in the pale yellow notebook she had bought specifically for the seminar. She had heard many things in many classrooms. She had rarely heard something she wanted to keep. She kept this. After the seminar, she walked to the site at Selton and Marsh, which was 12 minutes from the program building, a route she had begun to walk every Monday after the seminar as a way of applying what she had heard in the room to the specific reality of what she was building. She stood on the corner. She thought about where not to put structure. She thought about the passage and the way the passage required, structurally, a particular arrangement of the floor plates above it, and how that requirement had led to the corridor offset, and how the corridor offset had led to the alcoves, and how the alcoves had led to the planting possibility, and how the planting possibility had led to the idea of maintenance as architecture. One constraint had run through the entire design like a thread. She had followed the thread without knowing it was a thread. She had thought she was making individual decisions. She was actually following a single logic that had established itself in the moment she had decided where not to put structure. She stood on the corner for a long time. She walked back to the program building. She found a seminar room that was empty at this hour, and she sat at the table, with the notebook and the sketchbook, and she mapped the design backward from where it had ended up to where it had begun. The constraint was the thread. The thread was the building. She wrote, "The most important structural decision in any building is where not to put structure." She underlined it. She put the pen down. She looked at what she had written. She thought about where not to put herself. The parallel was so obvious she laughed, which she did not do often when she was alone. She had spent years putting herself everywhere she was needed, which is another way of saying she had not been thoughtful about where not to put herself. She had not negotiated. She had simply occupied whatever space required occupying. The space had always required occupying. She had never asked whether it needed her specifically. She thought about this for a while. Then she took out the sketchbook and went back to the drawings with the specific focused feeling of someone who has just understood something that changes how they see the thing they are looking at. Claire was the kind of colleague Nadia had hoped to find, and had not expected. She had expected efficiency and technical competence and a degree of professional authority that would need to be navigated carefully. The specific dynamic of a senior professional engaging with someone who had the creative lead but less experience. She had expected to spend some portion of her energy on the relationship as well as the work. Claire made this unnecessary. In the first working meeting, she had looked at Nadia's drawings with the complete attention of someone who has no use for hierarchy when there is an interesting problem in front of her, and she had asked questions that were not tests but genuine inquiries, and she had offered information without being asked, and she had pushed back on 2 decisions that she thought were driven by aesthetics rather than buildability, with a directness that Nadia found immediately useful. They had argued about the passage height. It was a productive argument. Claire thought the height Nadia had specified was more than structural requirements demanded, and would increase material costs significantly. Nadia explained that the height was not about structure but about the quality of the passage, the feeling of moving through something that was generous rather than efficient. Claire had listened to this. She had said, "Show me in the drawings why the height matters." Nadia had shown her. Claire had looked at the section for a while. She had said, "There's a way to achieve the same height with a lighter structural solution. It will require a specific steel specification that is not standard but is not exotic. Do you want to see it?" Nadia had said yes. Claire had sketched it on the back of the section drawing in 2 minutes. Nadia had looked at it. It was better than what she had specified. "How did you know that would work?" Nadia said. "Because the passage height matters," Claire said. "I believe you that it matters. So the goal is to find the best way to achieve it, not to argue with the goal." Nadia had thought about this for the rest of the day. She had thought about all the times in her previous experience of being collaborative that the argument had been about whether the goal was right rather than how to achieve it. She had thought about how much energy goes into the former that could go into the latter. She and Claire worked together with the specific efficiency of two people who have agreed on what matters and are focusing only on how to get there. In the third working meeting, Claire had looked at the sixth-floor drawings. She had been quiet for a moment. She had said, "These are designed differently from the rest of the building." "Yes," Nadia said. "They're quieter," Claire said. "Less communal." "They're designed for people who want to be in the building but above it," Nadia said. "The lower floors are about the community of the building. The sixth floor is about something more private." Claire had nodded. She had said, "The structural implications of that privacy will be interesting. I'll think about how to achieve the separation without it feeling imposed." She had come back the following week with a structural solution for the sixth-floor separation that was elegant in the engineering sense of the word, which is a different and arguably more demanding sense than the aesthetic one. Nadia had looked at it. She had said, "That is excellent." Claire had said, "I know. It took me 3 days." They had both laughed. Nadia did not often find people easy to work with. She had assumed, for a long time, that this was because she had high standards, and perhaps it was partly that. But she understood now that another part of it was that she had not previously been working with people who were as interested in doing the thing well as she was. She had been working with people who were interested in doing the thing, which is not quite the same. Claire was interested in doing the thing well. Nadia found this so refreshing she almost mentioned it, and then did not, because mentioning it would have made the working relationship into something more personal than it needed to be. She simply appreciated it. She appreciated it in the way you appreciate something that is exactly right, without needing to announce the appreciation. She went home. She opened the sketchbook. She worked on the passage. It was becoming, in the drawings, more real every day, not more elaborate, more certain. The lines were more definite, the decisions more settled, the building firmer in its own presence on the page. This was what good collaboration did. It made the thing more itself. She drew until late. She went to bed. She slept. In the morning she was at the site at 7:15, before the agreed time, because she wanted a few minutes alone on the corner before Calum arrived, before the coffee and the conversation, before the working morning that would follow. She stood on the corner. The light was very clear. She looked at the empty lot. She could see the building. Not as a drawing, not as a plan. As a thing that was going to exist, that was in the process of becoming real, that had moved from the interior of her mind to the paper, and from the paper to the documents, and from the documents to the world, and was now somewhere in the space between all of those, no longer imaginary, and not yet physical. She stood with that feeling. She held it. The light changed slightly as a cloud moved. She heard footsteps. She did not turn around. She did not need to. She knew the footsteps. He stood beside her. He stood beside her. He handed her a cup of coffee. She took it. They stood together on the corner of Selton and Marsh and looked at the empty lot where a building was going to be, and neither of them said anything for a long moment, because some moments are complete without language, and this was one of them. Then she told him about the passage height and Claire's structural solution and what she had understood, sitting in the seminar room with the notebook, about the difference between negotiating with a constraint and following it. He listened. He asked one question. She answered it. The morning began. The building was waiting. She was ready.